We're now live.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to today's meeting of the Calderdale and Kirklees Joint Health Scrutiny Committee, looking at the reconfiguration proposals for health services across Calderdale and Kirklees. First of all, have we any apologies for absence?
Yes, we do, Chair. Councillor Barnes has sent his apologies.
Thank you. And do we have any, we don't have any substitutes, is that correct?
No, Chair.
Can I remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests that they might have in relation to the items included on this agenda? And they can do that at the appropriate time or now. Councillor Swift. You're muted, Councillor Swift.
It's desperately trying to keep me muted. I usually declare an interest because I'm on the Board of Governors at the hospital. I don't know whether I should, but I usually do, so I'm clear with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Admissions of the public. It's not recommended that the public be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of the items of business on this agenda. Can we pass on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of August to be agreed as a correct record and signed by the chair? I am afraid I am not happy that these are a full and correct record. They include a list of questions asked, but not the answers given to those questions. And given that much of this process is about trying to clarify information that is given to us and to flesh it out, I think it is vital that the answers to questions are recorded in the minutes, because otherwise they will be lost forever. So I'm not going to propose that the minutes be signed. Is that acceptable to members? Richard Dunn?
Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, just from our perspective, from the office perspective, in terms of the minutes, the approach we take in Kirklees is to do obviously a summary of the discussion that takes place and obviously to highlight the issues that are raised. We don't do a verbatim record of the minutes, so we don't sort of fully record the questions and all of the answers, mainly because obviously it's a very time-consuming and resource-intensive approach. We do have a webcast and a recording of the meeting, so if anyone has any wants any detail about the actual discussions that took place, including any detailed responses, obviously they are there on record as well. So from an officer's perspective, that's the approach we take in Kirklees. We do these minutes for all our scrutiny panels in a very similar format. So I just wanted to make that point, obviously, before members make their decision. Thank you.
Okay. Do members have any comments? No, obviously I'm just being grumpy.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Could we perhaps agree the minutes, but ask that a summary be done of the answers to the questions, because when we're writing our report, those answers will be obviously included in that report. So could we ask for a summary of the answers to the questions to be produced? And I think that will help. Yeah, everybody. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. Richard, is that something that could be done?
Yeah, that's something that myself and Yolandi can probably look to do, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Swift?
I think I can put my hand down now, but I need both things, because if I check later on, you know, if I've only got questions and no answers, I'm going to struggle.
Yes, I don't think you'll be the only one that would be struggling.
Right.
All right. Well, under those circumstances, are the minutes agreed as correct, as a correct record as far as they go? And it's, yeah. See no dissent. All right. Thank you. Deputations and petitions. I believe we have no deputations or petitions presented. So we'll move on to item 6, which is Huddersfield Royal Infirmary New Accident and Emergency Department, and a summary overview of the draft full business case, which Anna Basford has been good enough to prepare for us. I would appreciate, so I would take it that members have already read the business case, the presentation. So rather than going through it blow by blow, I would like us to spend as much time as possible on questions arising from it, but maybe Anna would like to give us an idea of the points that she feels is most appropriate. And I would also like, for the record, as to for members of the public to understand why we're scrutinizing a PowerPoint summary of what is probably a much lengthier document rather than the document itself. Mike?
Councillor Hudson, I just wonder, for the benefit particularly of people watching on the YouTube stream, whether it's worth doing some quick introductions so that people are aware of who's in the room.
That's a good idea. I'll start. I'm Councillor Colin Hutchinson from Skirkett Ward in Calderdale, one of the vice chairs of this committee. Councillor Smage.
Yeah, I'm Liz Smage, Chair of Scrutiny in Kirklees and co-chair of this committee.
Councillor Munro.
Hello, I'm Councillor Alison Munro. I represent Almonbury Ward on Kirklees Council. Thank you.
Councillor Uppal.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Harpreet and I represent Ashbrow Ward in Kirklees. Thanks.
Councillor Cooper.
I'm Councillor Andrew Cooper. I represent the Newsham Ward in Kirklees.
Councillor Blackburn.
My name's Howard Blackburn. I'm the chair of the Adults Scrutiny in Calderdale, and I've served on this committee for quite some time. So we want to get on with the with the actual building work. Thank you.
I'm just going round my screen. Mark Davis.
Morning, I'm Mark Davis. I'm a consultant in emergency medicine and one of the clinical leads for reconfiguration and transformation at Calderdale and Huddersfield Trust.
Thank you. Gautam Chakrabarti.
Good morning. I'm Gautam Chakrabarti. I'm a consultant orthopedic surgeon and one of the clinical leads for reconfiguration and transformation of services.
Thank you. Stuart Barron.
Good morning all, I'm Stuart Barron. I'm Associate Director of Finance for Huddersfield Foundation Trust.
Anna Basford.
Hello, my name's Anna Basford. I'm Director of Transformation and Partnerships at Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust.
Thank you. Nicola Bailey.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Nicola Bailey and I'm the Reconfiguration and Transformation Programme Manager for the Trust.
Good morning. Neil Smurthwaite.
Good morning, I'm Neil Smurthwaite, Chief Operating Officer for the Calderdale Clinical Commissioning Group.
Welcome. Carol McKenna.
Hi, I'm Carol McKenna. I'm Chief Officer for Kirklees CCG.
Thank you very much. And then other attendees are officers of the committee. So over to you, Anna. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, so to introduce this report, I was just going to highlight a few points. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on the development of the full business case for a new accident and emergency department at Huddersfield Royal Infirmary. Our aspiration is to provide a much needed new state-of-the-art A&E in Huddersfield. This responds to an estate review which concluded that the existing Huddersfield A&E that was built over 60 years ago is reaching the end of its functional life and no longer fit for purpose. There's a clear need for a modern replacement A&E department in Huddersfield. In 2020, NHS England and the Department of Health confirmed that the Trust plans for investment in a new A&E department should be expedited to enable us to minimise safety risks and be able to move to construction of the new A&E as early as possible. It was therefore confirmed that the Trust should prepare a full business case for the new A&E. The full business case has been prepared in accordance with the agreed standards and format for business cases that are set down by the Department of Health and by Treasury. In parallel to the development of the full business case for the Accident and Emergency Department in Huddersfield, we have also developed an outline business case describing the planned reconfiguration of services across the two hospital sites, and information related to that outline business case is included later on your agenda this morning. In September, Kirklees Council granted full planning permission for the build of the new A&E at HRI, and subject to approval of the full business case by NHS England and the Department of Health, we are aiming to commence construction of the new Accident and Emergency Department in early 2022, with completion in 2023. The design of the new A&E has been informed by significant public and stakeholder involvement, and it seeks to ensure the provision of modern facilities that will deliver leading-edge healthcare services. We're confident the design plans have incorporated key learning during the pandemic, with improved layouts that will strengthen infection control and resilience going forwards. The designs will also improve environmental sustainability and enable our progress towards net zero carbon targets. These developments will secure a much needed and state-of-the-art replacement accident and emergency department for Huddersfield. The plans will support the longer-term resilience of acute and emergency service provision, and they have a critical importance in supporting the overall resilience of hospital services across West Yorkshire. Myself and colleagues attending today from CHFT will be very happy to respond to questions that you may have. If some of the questions you ask, we need time to collate information to respond more fully, we will provide timely written responses subsequent to the meeting this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Can I just ask for clarification? The chairs of this committee have met informally with representatives of NHS England and yourself regarding the opportunities for closer scrutiny of the actual documents that underpin a project that is due to actually start construction very shortly. Could you, for the record, could you just explain why we are scrutinising the presentation rather than those documents?
The document and the full business case that has been prepared is currently progressing through a process around due diligence, review and approval through the regional NHS EI team, and subsequently it will go to national level approval of that document. Ahead of that process, the document is not suitable for publication. It's still a document that is going through those stages of approval and therefore is not a public document.
Thank you. I think it's helpful for the public to know why we're doing this why we're asking so many questions, and a lot of it is to try and flesh out what might or might not be within that document. So over to members. Councillor Smage.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow on from that, please, Councillor Hutchinson. There is a duty to provide such information about the planning, provision and operation of health services so that we may reasonably require to discharge our health scrutiny functions. Under that specific regulation, there is a a caveat that in some cases information such as financial information may be commercially sensitive, and in such cases it may be possible for health scrutiny to receive this information in confidence, to inform but not be directly referred to in its reports and recommendations. We had a discussion that included NHS England, and NHS England did undertake to ascertain whether there were any parts of that document that we could see. And Anna, I would ask that if it can be followed up with NHS England as to what progress has been made, because there is that onus on ourselves to fully satisfy ourselves that we are doing the scrutiny that we need to do to ensure that the health services are delivering for the residents of both Kirklees and Calderdale. I think it's really important, especially the OBC as well. We're talking the FBC at the moment because that's more time critical, but the OBC is for the whole reconfiguration. I think we ought to just bear that in mind, that it's for the whole reconfiguration is the OBC. And therefore the FBC we need to see, but we also need to see that OBC as well. Okay, so just wanted to put that in a little bit of context. But I think it's really, really important that members have plenty of time today to ask the questions, and as many questions as possible. Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. And just for members of the public, OBC is outline business case, which is, we've had publication of the strategic outline case back in 2019, which lays the foundations for this project. That's followed up by an outline business case. And then the final stage is a full business case, which includes the full details of the financial viability of schemes. So that's the process that we're involved in. So OBC is outline business case and FBC is full business case. Councillor Blagborough.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. It was most helpful. I suppose the question is when are we likely to see the main document actually produced, and when can we actually scrutinise the full document? I have a few concerns in relation to contingencies in relation to costs and escalating costs. You know, given the economic situation at the moment, you know, how confident are we that actually it will be built on time, within budget, with the resources that we actually have? So probably a few extra questions moving along, but those are my main concerns. Is actually when are we going to see the documentation? Because it appears at the moment that actually we're going to be starting the building and then seeing the presentation, the main documents after this process. And my fear is that actually that might be too late. That's just a thought from my point of view.
Anna, would you like to comment on those concerns?
In relation to the full business case, as was discussed during the meeting with NHS England, the approval timeline for that to complete going through national processes, we're targeting for that to be concluded by February. We have indicated that in relation to the full business case, and I want to be specific, it's the full business case that's subsequent to national approvals, that we would then be in a position to share the full business case for publication.
And I mean that the Place Scrutiny Board in Calderdale last week, we were informed that there is a current 8% inflation rate on construction materials and significant shortages of construction workforce, which obviously is a concern, as that inflation rate in construction materials is continuing to increase and showing no sign of levelling off. So we would like some, how can we be confident that this project is going to actually be financially viable?
I'll ask my colleague Stuart, who's put his hand up as well, to respond to that.
Stuart?
Thanks, Anna. So to HRI, the trust board a partner called IHP, and they're a partner that we have on board at the moment. I've already procured them as they support our construction works and work undertaken at HRI already. We have gone through a design process with them on board, and they have...
Stuart, can I just stop you there? Your connection is terrible, so you're breaking up a lot. Can I suggest you switch off your video, and that might make us be able to hear what you're saying.
Apologies, I've followed your advice, Councillor.
That sounds
so apologies. What I was describing was the trust has already appointed a construction partner called IHP, who are on board with the project and have been involved in the pricing and costing and design of the HRI development. They have priced that development reflecting the current costs, and we have what we refer to as a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price for the project now, which is what's reflected in our business case. So we have took steps through our procurement and through our construction partner to guarantee that the price is within the affordable envelope. And they've already delivered projects previously with the trust and have had the capacity and understanding of us as an organisation to deliver the project.
Right, and just following on from that, we were also informed that design and build projects have a particular risk of value engineering under these circumstances, in which changes are made to the design to enable it to come in within budget. What precautions are being taken to make sure that any such changes don't have a significant impact on the subsequent long-term operation of the facility?
So if I give you a brief answer, and then I'll invite Mark to comment from a clinical perspective on that. So our design for the new emergency department is compliant with the HBNs and HTM, so the health building notifications and health technical memorandums, which is the guidance that the organisation follows to ensure it's designed to compliant modern standards. So that is the current way that it's been designed, and Mark and the team have been heavily involved in that and led the design for that, and I'll invite Mark to comment from a clinical perspective.
Thank you. Dr. Davis?
Yes, thank you. And I agree that, yeah, I was conscious that any value engineering which needed to be undertaken didn't impact on clinical care and the clinical operational function of the unit. And I've been personally involved in that. So there have been some changes that were proposed, which I've effectively vetoed. And there have been other changes that I've agreed. So, for example, changing a square ceiling light to a round ceiling light doesn't have a significant impact, but making the room significantly smaller or removing rooms from the building completely has a significant impact. So I'm comfortable that none of the changes that have been proposed or are being put forward will have a significant clinical impact on the function of the department. Otherwise, there's no point us doing it in the first place.
I'm very grateful for your assurance, Mark. Thank you. Councillor Smage?
Yeah, thank you. In the SOC, it's stated in the estate plan that the proposal does not fully address backlog maintenance requirements at HRI, and it says it continues to manage a very high risk in terms of the condition and reliability of buildings at HRI. What is there about this in the FBC or the OBC, and what is the current estate cost model? Thank you.
Who would like to address that point?
Happy to do so.
Yes,
Councillor Hutchinson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Barron.
So in response to the backlog maintenance element of it, as referred to in the strategic outline case, the latest assessment of backlog maintenance for HRI was £85 million. So a significant backlog maintenance, and what members will recognise that the investment of £15 million into the HRI plus the additional commitment that we've got and spend on HRI won't address in full HRI's backlog maintenance. what we are looking to do is to maximise the value for money of that investment, so that we, instead of spending on old estate, as Mark described, the non-compliant ED that we have at the moment, we are building the new ED and addressing some of the backlog maintenance that exists with that. There will be, I think we've previously reported here, significant investment into the estate going forward as well. So we've already spent significant sums of money in the past few years doing things like replacing handling units, chillers, ward upgrades, etc. And a significant amount of the backlog maintenance is associated with the cladding, which we have plans, as outlined in the outline business case, to do that upgrade and replacement. And we'll continue to spend our internal resource that we have from capital on HRI to maintain the estate going forward.
Can I just get clarification? Is this included within the full business case, or is this programme of work something that we would be able to scrutinise now?
So the full business case is purely around the investment into the HRI A&E department, and the trust, through its annual planning process, commits capital expenditure every year to address backlog maintenance that exists. So whether that be replacement of pipes or upgrades of infrastructure electrically or whatever, that happens annually every year.
Right. Okay.
So can we see that information? Can we see that cost modelling? Can we see that information in detail about the estate?
I'm happy to share outside of the meeting as a written response the elements of investment that have been made in the estate and what's planned going forward.
And is that modelling in which business case is that modelling in, and can we see the detail that's in that business case?
So the historic spend that I will provide details on isn't in a business case because it's historic, and there is an annual capital programme planned going forward, along with the estate investment on cladding that I've described, included within the OBC, and that just describes our whole business as an organisation. As I said earlier on, the HRI FBC is purely around the investment and the development of the new A&E.
Yeah, so the rest of the maintenance then that needs to be done going forward, not the historic or the capital spend, is in the OBC. Therefore, can we see that information?
Correct. I'm happy to provide a profile of capital spend going forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to raise a question in relation to the impact of COVID and whether that's been taken into account with these plans, because it's quite some time since it went through the planning process. So what safety precautions are being put in place, or what additional safety precautions are being put in place for future reference. And the other element is the description, and I'm presuming, it's worth asking the question, but I'm presuming the existing A&E will continue to operate until a time when actually it's signed off, and people know about this. And I guess the third thing is actually communicating to people once it is open, actually just various, what then happens, where does someone go if they live in Big House, for instance, because actually it's between Huddersfield and Calderdale. So questions like that really that spring to mind at the moment.
Anna, would you?
I think Mark's put his hand up to respond to those questions.
Yeah, certainly. So in terms of COVID, I think we've discussed here previously the plans for the new emergency department at Huddersfield were undertaken during the height of the pandemic, and in particularly infection control processes have been paramount in that. So things like being able to segregate the department into a high risk and medium risk department with separate air handling units for each side of the department. The use of single rooms of a similar size that are multifunctional should be required. Glass doors from infection control perspective. So all of those things have been taken into account in the design. I think you mentioned about the current emergency department. Yeah, this new development of an emergency department at Huddersfield will effectively take over the work of the current emergency department in 2023. The current ED will function until we move into the new ED. And part of that moving in process, there will be a communications exercise with the public, so they know, don't go down that drive, go down this drive, so that they know where they're going. In terms of the long-term changes that I think you mentioned between Calderdale and Huddersfield, again, there's a huge communication exercise that will be undertaken in due course, so that the members of the public are aware of what services are available on which site. Because, yeah, we want people to go to the right place as well.
Councillor Harpreet.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. I think one of the things I did want to talk about was comms, and I think we all understand there's real concerns in Huddersfield about what's happening with the reconfiguration. So anything that we can do to make sure that it's very, very clear to local residents what's happening on each site and how to get to where they need to is really important, sort of longer term. So thanks for that. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. Firstly, on the construction phase, in the presentation, it says construction is looking to commence in December 2021, but I think Anna mentioned construction in early 2022. Obviously, there's likely to be some changes in timelines. I totally understand that, but I don't know if you can just clarify if it's this year or early next year that you're looking at in terms of construction. And again, I'm just wondering with your partners if you've had any discussions around sort of labour shortages in construction as well, and if that's been flagged as an issue at all currently. And can I just ask one question on the social value plan? It says that in terms of, you've got a social value portal and you're looking to target social value in terms of apprenticeships, local jobs. I don't know if you've got any further information that you can provide about how that will happen, and how you're targeting perhaps the local workforce. And it also says that it will support economic recovery from the pandemic and address health inequalities or this social value programme. So I don't know if you can say how will it address health inequalities, for example. Sorry, I know there's a few questions there.
So I'll try to cover those in the order in which you asked them, Councillor Harpreet. So the first one around the start date, yes, we have previously produced documents indicating that we were aspiring to a commencement of construction in late 2021. We are dependent upon the conclusion of the approvals process with our regional NHS England colleagues and national team, hence the movement into 2022. We're seeking as early a decision as possible. You'll understand we're keen to start that construction work. In terms of labour shortages, I think we're well aware of the challenges in the construction industry generally. It's not an area that I'm conscious has been specifically highlighted to us by our contractors for the full business case as an issue of concern at this point. Clearly, if any of my colleagues on the call have any greater knowledge than I do on that or aware of something that I'm not, please do raise your hand if you want to come in there to correct me. The third item that you raised around social value and around economic recovery and health inequalities, this is a really important part of the reconfiguration programme about the wider benefits that this can generate for our local communities in Huddersfield and Calderdale. And to do that, what we've done is we've worked with the Social Value Portal, which are an organisation used by many, you'll be aware, many local authority councils, to look at how through procurement or through construction, you can target job creation and target that to areas of greatest need to the most deprived communities, but also to groups of people with protected characteristics. So that's how it can address the health inequalities, by targeting job creation, for example, amongst people, apprenticeship opportunities, for example, for people who have a learning disability, or apprenticeship opportunities for people who have been unemployed for more than 2 years. They've undertaken detailed work for us, and we have liaised with both councils with their internal teams about how you use Social Value Portal within the councils. and it's used council-held data around local needs in communities to create a targeted action plan. So the stage that we're at now, prior to commencement of construction, is we're very clear about how we can have the most impact in targeting job creation into those communities and opportunities. The transaction of that will be delivered through work of our contractors. So the builders will appoint their team of staff to build the buildings, and as part of that we will be monitoring with them, and they will be reporting to us that job creation, how many construction jobs are created, and the profile of that, to be able to demonstrate that targeted positive impact into our local communities. Hence, it is a way of supporting job creation and economic recovery coming out of the pandemic and addressing health inequalities. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just quickly follow up, Chair?
Yes, certainly.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, will you be like, how will that happen? Like, will you be setting some targets around what your expectations of local recruitment? You mentioned people with learning disabilities there. I mean, would you want to set some targets around the local population to say, look, we want this many people from, from protected characteristics to take on work around the construction of the site? I'm just wondering what that actually looks like.
So in terms of taking that forward, there would be positive action to reach out to those communities. And some of the dialogue that we've had with both councils is that, local authorities are experienced in doing this and around being able to have that reach into communities. So we will expect our construction partners to work with those local communities around that targeted job creation.
Thank you. Councillor Smage?
Yeah, thanks. Is it possible to see that social value action plan? I can't see that it would be commercially sensitive if it's an action plan. Is it possible to see that? Because it uses publicly available information, surely, in its creation. And my other question is on about another slide that says improve compliance with statutory, regulatory and accepted best practice, and improve efficiency and use of resources, supporting the local and regional system affordability. Is it possible to have far more detail on that as to how the FBC addresses those points? Thank you.
So just responding to that, Councillor Smage, yes, we can share with you the social value work that's been undertaken. And the second point that you raised around regulatory standards and more effective and efficient working in the Accident and Emergency Department, I can see Mark's already raised his hand. I was going to suggest that Mark might want to come in on that.
On you go, Mark.
Yeah, certainly, and I think we can probably provide you with some written responses in a bit more detail, but just as a sort of a summary in terms of regulatory compliance, the current emergency department at Huddersfield isn't compliant with the standards of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health for management of children in urgent care settings, in that it doesn't have a dedicated audiovisually separate paediatric area. The new building will. The facilities for people in distress from mental health, the current facility does what we can, but doesn't meet those standards. The new building will. The decontamination facilities in the new building will meet standards which the current services don't, without putting a tent up outside. So those are some of the examples where we will be able to comply with national guidance and statutory requirements. So those are the sort of things. But yeah, we can give you a full detailed report of what it does and why it does it.
Can I just ask Mark here about the way that this will work? We know that ambulatory care has been a major plank of linking in with emergency care for some considerable time, and seems to have a lot of benefits, offer a lot of benefits. will the accident and emergency facility at Huddersfield support ambulatory care, and how will it fit in with the model of care provided? And I wondered whether the beds for physician-led inpatient care at Huddersfield Royal are just going to be used for patients transferred from Calderdale Royal in a step-down kind of process, or will they also be used for patients from Huddersfield Royal, from the accident and emergency department?
Okay, so I think from your question there, it sounds like we're getting into discussion about the future model of care rather than the FBC. The FBC for Huddersfield is about building a new emergency department at Huddersfield. That new emergency department at Huddersfield is going to be built for 2023 before we've fully reconfigured and transformed our services when we've built a new facility at Calderdale as well. So the new ED at Huddersfield will effectively take on the work of the current ED, but in a building that's fit for purpose.
So does sorry.
At the point that we reconfigure our services completely as we've planned in the operating model, then part of the new facility at Huddersfield will be repurposed to provide an element of observational beds, like a clinical decision unit type facility for patients presenting to Huddersfield who need a bit of a longer period of observation, but not necessarily acute inpatient care, because all patients beyond around 2025 requiring acute inpatient care will be going over to Calderdale, because that's where all our acute inpatient services will be provided.
Okay, I think that goes part of the way to explaining how it's going to function. But one of the sustainability of the accident and emergency medicine workforce was a major reason put forward for the reconfiguration, was a major concern for the Royal College of Emergency Medicine. What confidence can we have with the model that is being developed, that this reconfiguration will lead to a sustainable staffing situation for emergency care across Calderdale and Kirklees?
I think it's fair to say that the original model proposed by CHFT was for one emergency department across the whole of Calderdale and Kirklees, or Calderdale and Huddersfield. And we've been asked to maintain an accident emergency service at Huddersfield. So that does, in some respects, dilute to a degree the improvements in staffing that we proposed originally. That said, by concentrating the majority of our acute inpatient services onto the Calderdale site, as is proposed, we will be able to expand the emergency medicine medical workforce at Calderdale while maintaining a safe level of staffing at Huddersfield, but in recognition that the majority of the particularly sick and ill and injured patients will be taken directly to Calderdale by emergency ambulance. So we can enhance our medical workforce at Calderdale, and by concentrating on one site but still providing support to the other site, we can increase our medical workforce at Calderdale, and that makes it a far more attractive place to work. And we know from colleagues who've left as consultants at CHFT, some have left because we're still a split site. Others have articulated that they don't want to come and work with us because we're a split site and you're effectively joining two small teams rather than joining one big team. But this change will allow us to provide one big team while at the same time providing support to the Huddersfield site.
Thank you for that explanation, Mark. Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I'd quite like the opportunity to actually meet the construction company themselves, because actually we want to work with them. We'll be scrutinising the work that they carry on. So it will be interesting to see their portfolio of projects they've previously done. We may have seen it in the past, but actually to have a good working relationship, I have assurances from Mark. I get what you're saying in relation to it's going to be built on time and in budget. But I want to hear directly from what their challenges are and what they face, and moving forward, actually, that we will be there scrutinising everything they do, from day one onwards, I guess, in some ways. So we're whilst they're reporting to you, I think it's really important to have a working relationship with the construction company as well. Just a thought, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll explore that possibility. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just say the following. The presentation obviously only provides us with one perspective, one viewpoint. We have to accept that you were asking us to have faith and trust in what you're doing, because we are not being given the information that we really need. So, for example, in the management case, the assessment concluded there were many positive impacts identified from the build of a new A&E at HRI. So, what were those positive impacts? Were there any negative? Were there any detrimental impacts? We're not given that information, and I feel we kind of started, along those lines at the beginning. But I feel this is, we in order for us to actually understand what's happening here, and that the right decisions are being made and the right options are being considered, we really did need more information, and I feel it's it's not right that we've not been given that. Thank you. That's all I want to say.
And any comments on that? Because obviously the scheme has been telescoped in that the outline business case has been omitted within this particular part of the development. So we've gone straight from a strategic outline case to a full business case.
Yeah, it's wrong.
No. Yeah, Anna.
I was just going to comment. I think I answered earlier in the meeting the timeline around the approvals are being key to our ability to publish the full document. In terms of the question or the issue that you raised there, Councillor Munro, around the key benefits and positive impacts, we can certainly provide additional detail following this meeting to you in a written form to provide that information.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
I'm very conscious that we've not started considering the outline business case, so I will want to draw this section of the agenda to a conclusion soon. But Councillor Smage.
Yeah, thank you. I think my question just follows up on financial sustainability, really, both for because your slide mentions about the impact on the income and expenditure, and the providing an overall financial improvement, but also it goes to the next item on the agenda, the OBC, that Scrutiny does need to understand that the financial sustainability for services into the future, and that there isn't any risk of greater debt on the trust as a result of the full reconfiguration. So I think that goes to both sections. Thank you.
Again, is that something you're able to address now, or will provide written information subsequently?
In responding to that, Councillor Smage, I mean, the question you're asking is around the assurances around financial sustainability, which is the purpose of the business case, is to demonstrate that the proposed investments deliver benefits and support financial sustainability in the longer term. Both of those are areas that will be key areas of the review currently being undertaken by NHS England and Department of Health in their processes around approval of those business cases. There is a process of due diligence around that and around that modelling to be able to demonstrate that financial viability of the proposals.
And it's also financial implications are also a scrutiny aspect that we need to take into consideration when we're considering impacts on services as well. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor Cooper.
I know that you've got integrated health projects from the National Procurement Framework as a contractor on this. I'm just wondering how far the what's going to be constructed is going to be built from a model, a national model, and how much of influence we will have over the design. Is it a flat pack design that comes forward, or is it something that we can influence in some way, or is it a combination of both?
I think Stuart's going to come in on that one.
And Mark, feel free to chip in from your involvement in the design. So IHP have been appointed, and what they will, or what they've sought to do along with the architect IBI, is make use of designs that have already been there and existing. So what gets referred to as repeatable rooms, which is a DHSC approved kind of design, but it also makes use of what we call MMC, so modern methods of construction, and the idea being that we benefit from packages of things coming into that design so that we're not starting from scratch. And the architect and design partner in IBI and IHP, as I referenced, have both got experience of doing these sort of things throughout. And Mark might now comment on the designs that is tailored as part of his team.
Yeah, certainly. I'm not in a position to comment on what bricks or blocks they use to build the walls, but certainly in terms of the design of the facility, I think it's fair to say that we've worked together with the architects, IBI and IHP, the building partner, to come up with a design that meets our needs as clinicians, but takes into account their experience of building facilities elsewhere. Both IBI and IHP have got a big backlog or big background of working and designing healthcare facilities, and I think we've shared some of the ones that they've designed here previously. But yeah, I can say that this isn't a department that they've provided for us. We've had significant conversations, shall we say, and redesigns to make it for our purpose.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, I think we'll draw a line under this for the time being and move on to agenda item 7, the reconfiguration of Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust services and estate developments, and summary of the strategic case section of the draft outline business case, which Anna Basford has shared with us originally, but I've wondered whether there's any particular comments you would want to make, Anna, before members start with their questions.
Thank you for that opportunity. I'll just have some introductory comments to the document that's been shared. So members of the Joint Health and Scrutiny Committee will be very aware that several independent reviews have recommended that changes to the configuration of hospital services across Calderdale Royal Hospital and Huddersfield Royal Infirmary are needed to improve patient outcomes and safety. Public consultation on those proposed future arrangements for the configuration of services took place in 2016. And as a result of that public consultation, changes to the proposals were agreed that responded to the recommendations of the Independent Reconfiguration Panel and to the Secretary of State for Health. Following these changes, the Department of Health allocated public capital funding to enable implementation of those proposals. And in 2019, the Trust published the strategic outline case describing the plans for reconfiguration across our 2 hospitals. The plan is to invest at Calderdale Royal Hospital to provide additional wards, theatres and a new accident and emergency department. And that includes a specialist paediatric accident and emergency department. As we've just discussed, at Huddersfield Royal Infirmary, investment will enable the build of a new accident and emergency department, and also the ongoing investment into the existing buildings at Huddersfield Royal Infirmary to address essential estate safety and maintenance requirements. The plans described in the outline business case will ensure accident and emergency provision at both sites and enable the co-location of unplanned inpatient care at Calderdale Royal Hospital and planned inpatient care at Huddersfield Royal Infirmary. The plans will maintain the total bed capacity across both hospitals. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the information that's been included in the outline business case in the strategic chapter. The outline business case has been prepared in accordance with agreed standards and formats required by the Department of Health and by Treasury. In parallel, as you know, a full business case for the investments into Huddersfield Royal Infirmary has been prepared. We have submitted the outline business case to NHS England for review, and we have submitted an outline planning application to Calderdale Council with an expected determination on that planning application in January. Subject to necessary approvals of the outline business case and planning determination, our aim is to complete the construction of works on the Calderdale Royal Hospital site by 2025. The West Yorkshire Integrated Care System has confirmed that the planned service reconfiguration and the estates developments that enable that fit with the overall strategy for improved health and care across West Yorkshire as a whole and remain a top priority for the West Yorkshire Integrated Care System. The plans will support the longer term resilience of acute and emergency service provision and overall hospital resilience across West Yorkshire. Again, myself and colleagues from CHFT today will be happy to answer questions that you may have. And again, if we do need time to collate additional information, we'll be happy to provide more detailed responses subsequent to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Councillor Smage.
Thank you. In your strategic outline case of 2019, you have a list of health needs in Calderdale and Huddersfield that is based on the census data of 2011. As there was a recent census, would you be updating your OBC with the health needs of people in Calderdale and Huddersfield from that updated census information when it's available? Have the health needs changed at all?
So yes, we're aware, and as everyone is aware, that there was the national census takes place every 10 years, and that was repeated in 2021, and that provides important information around local demographic and population health needs. During the pandemic, clearly the updating of health needs assessment by each council's public health functions has not been by necessity undertaken during that period. Clearly the high priority of managing the pandemic has taken precedence. I am aware that councils are now looking at refresh around health needs analysis and around updating of joint strategic needs assessments. We are participating in meetings relating to that so that we're involved in that process, and we will of course refresh should there be material changes in that needs analysis arising from that. At this point in time, there isn't a refreshed version for us to use in that way, but we're very alert to taking account of that as required when it's available. What we have done in the development around our outline business case is during the pandemic, both councils undertook detailed work to understand the impact of the pandemic on their local communities in terms of the impact on health inequalities. And we have considered and received those documents into the trust and as part of our overall strategic planning, not just related to the programme of reconfiguration, but more generally about how as a whole system we respond to better support our communities in coming out of the pandemic and in ongoing recovery.
Okay, thanks. Can I do a follow-up then? Because yes, I understand that you need up-to-date information. This is why I'm asking, because a lot of things may have changed, and I understand that there are people coming into hospital with more acute needs, and therefore that is something that may have a longer term impact. But also there'll be impact on CCG and community services. And there was in the SOC something about a reduction on non-elective beds by 30% over 5 years. And I'm wondering if how that is modelled in the OBC, is it still achievable? And what is the modelling that forms part of the business cases from both the CCG and community services? Thank you.
I'm happy to start a response to that, and potentially clinical commissioning colleagues may want to come in as well if Carol and Neil are comfortable with me starting a response to that. So in terms of, you referred to there, Councillor Smage, a 30% reduction in bed days. The reference to that was included in the strategic outline case was a reference to work that was undertaken during 2018 to review best practice opportunities. So it took account of our current rates of non-elective admissions to hospital and looked at some of the best performing other areas nationally and internationally to look at what might be the headline achievement that could be achieved if we were absolutely top of class. There was an aspiration noted that, of course, any system would aspire to be top of class, but there wasn't a firm commitment to say we are aiming to deliver a 30% reduction in bed days. In fact, the strategic outline case, and as I referenced in my introduction, there are no plans within the current outline business case that is being considered for a reduction in bed numbers across the 2 hospital sites. We are maintaining bed numbers, and that was a key recommendation arising from the independent reconfiguration panel. What we are aware of is that in the intervening period, since 2018, there has been significant investment into community and primary care-based services, and a report was previously brought forward by the clinical commissioning group colleagues to this committee, detailing those investments and the impacts they have had, the positive impacts. But just to re-emphasise, we are not, as a consequence of that, taking action to reduce hospital-based capacity.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that your OBC does just say that, and I'm actually wanting to know what that modelling is from the CCGs and community services that has informed that OBC.
I don't have anything to add to what Anna said, because I was going to make the points about we were not working on the assumption of beds being reduced, but we will always aspire to make sure that we avoid people having to be admitted to hospital wherever possible. We have provided information both to this meeting and separately to panel members about the extent of the investment and development work we've done within our community services. And I know we're picking some of that up separately in our place-based panels as well. So I think Anna's response was pretty comprehensive really on that. Can I just apologise in advance because I'll have to come off the call in 5 minutes. I do have another meting that I did let the chair know, but if I suddenly disappear, that's why.
Which is why I tried to ask the question when I did, Carol. Yes, but as I understand it, there has been information that has been given from other services to input into the OBC. And if we can't see the OBC, can we see that information that has been put into that OBC?
Sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to, Councillor Smage. I don't know, Anna, if you can help. Sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
The outline business case doesn't include a quantified modelling around an assumed reduction in non-elective admissions on the back of those community investments.
No, but does it have capacity? Does it have capacity to help support your reconfiguration from community services? Does it have about capacity in there?
The outline business case, the scope of it doesn't have a detailed capacity modelling in relation to the community services, as has been referred to by Carol. Those processes around looking at the detail related to the community developments is being dealt with separately, and it's not a key chapter within the outline business case. The key focus around bed capacity within the modelling in the outline business case is around us maintaining that capacity, and we have refreshed our activity assumptions around non-elective admissions, taking account of a 3-year trend in activity.
Okay, it's just that when a question was asked about whether people had input into the business cases, the answer was yes. So that is why I'm asking for that information. But I'll let others ask their questions. Thank you.
Yes, I will bring in others, but I mean, we have been provided with a report that's coming to Calderdale Adults Health Scrutiny and Care Scrutiny Committee on Thursday, which does include population figures And I would point out in the last 3 years, there's been a 5% increase in the population served by this panel, which isn't reflected in the figures that have been provided in the slides. And there's also been very large changes in the age distribution within those populations, which I would hope is reflected in the outline business case and is taken into account in. I mean, I'm surprised if there hasn't been a review of the capacity modelling within it, because, you know, we're not in a static situation, and saying keeping the bed numbers the same as they are doesn't necessarily mean that they're fit for the coming 10, 20 years in the light of demographic changes. I mean, it does say in the strategic outline case, a detailed review and updated modelling of bed requirements on each site will be undertaken during development of the OBC. Now, I presume that has taken place. So, you know, asking what does this modelling tell us, and are the assumptions on page 34 of the strategic outline case still valid? So I'm a bit dismayed if you're saying that there has been no capacity modelling done as part of the outline business case when it was, you know, assured within the strategic outline case that would take place.
We have undertaken further work to revisit the planning assumptions used in the strategic outline case, and we have validated that those assumptions remain valid to use at this point in time. As we've reported previously into the Joint Scrutiny Committee, issues related to the creation of backlogs of care that have arisen through the pandemic, the expectation is that we will have addressed those at the point of, by the time of reconfiguration in 2025. And we've, as I say, we've done that work to revisit the planning assumptions that were used in 2019 to validate those using 1920 data. Clearly, the intervening period of the pandemic has been an unusual time around. Obviously, activity was not at its normal delivery model. So we've used the most available data to revalidate those planning assumptions. And again, these are areas that are being raised today, which will clearly be a focus through the NHS England and Department of Health review around the outline business case.
Yeah, okay. You know, because within health management circles, we're continually being told we are where we are, not necessarily where we would like to be. But Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Chair. My question kind of feeds into what you've just been discussing. It's in relation to care closer to home and capacity. You stated earlier that there's evidence of significant investment in community and primary care services, which have increased capacity. However, and you're going to say these developments are enabling people to be cared for appropriately, but as you've just touched on, population numbers have increased more than was predicted, and doctors' services locally where I live, the systems are broken. 111 is broken. There are so many people accessing services, the systems can't cope. So I feel that for care closer to home to work and be efficient, I think there needs to be more significant investment in primary care services to enable a more efficient and appropriate system of care because of the capacity issues. Thank you. My question therefore is, is there, have you tabled in for the future some additional investment in primary care? Is that being looked at? Sorry.
I think Neil was indicating to come in.
Neil?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Munro. So the government has an ongoing annual investment in general practice. I think that's referred to in both the place-based sort of community reports about the levels that are going into additional roles on an annual basis. That is a commitment until 2023. And I think in Calderdale, over the life of that investment, that's an additional £6.5 million into general practice. And you are right, a lot of health services and social care services under a significant strain at the moment. And a lot of this is around recognising there are workforce issues that need to be addressed, but can be addressed by alternative workforce methods, which will be highlighted and sort of shown as have had success in Calderdale on Thursday. With regards to community as itself, I think we have recognised that the urgent community response in Kirklees, which has been in shadow for the last 12 months and comes into operation in Calderdale in December, starts to recognise the importance of investing in community services to avoid emissions as well. So there is continual investment. It's not a, we have just invested this and we're stopping now. We see community as an ongoing priority in both areas to recognise the needs and demands and to react to the available funding that comes through from central government.
Sorry, you're muted, Councillor Munro.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, thank you for that. I just noted in a report that was sent to us before this meeting a couple of weeks ago that it was stated in relation to care closer to home that the approach is not solely based on increasing staff, but based on doing things differently and using overall system resources. But you have to have a certain level of staffing to make everything work. So really the workforce issue is huge, and none of this will be effective or will work effectively or efficiently if you don't have the staff and you don't have that level of investment in primary care. Thanks.
Councillor Swift.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Two quick comments or questions. Community care or care in the community or whatever title we are giving. Since I first became involved in the council, people have been saying we've got to improve community care, etc., etc. I don't think we've done very much at all. You might go to some of the, I'm going to say posh because I can't think of another word, to be honest, areas where there's quite a good system, where, you know, the GPs seem to have their act together most of the time. And that's not a criticism of them, it's just what's happening. But, you know, we keep being told other things won't work if we don't have don't have enough community care. And the other bit is going back about 3 weeks, it was reported that over Kirklees and Calderdale, we had nearly 100 people who were in bed who should not have been in bed and were fit to go home or into the community. I can't see how, if we're doing that amount of having to keep people back, how the figures will work. And also, I just don't see how it works. Something's got to change, and I believe it's the care in the community that needs to change first, because without it, we've nothing to do that will assist these people who are going home or not home, as the case may be.
Does anyone like to pick up the Neil?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Swift. So the discharge to assess list, as you referred to, is quite high and reflecting probably the pressures that are in the social care market at this moment in time, not necessarily health community services. That's not to say that we ignore those. We work very jointly with our social care colleagues in both local authorities to maximise both home care and care homes. And there's a huge amount of work going on to sort of rectify that situation at the time. I think Some of the specific community questions might want to be retained for the Thursday Calderdale place-based conversation about community, where we do go into a lot of detail around the health services that are reducing the length of stay of people in hospital, which does enable people to be out of hospital bed and in their own homes, which is our preferred place. But that does require all parts of the system to be able to have the necessary workforce and supply to meet the necessary demand. So that is an ongoing issue between health and social care to address those pressures that we're seeing in the system at the moment. But I wouldn't say that we've not done anything. I'd say the report that we're presenting to Calderdale Scrutiny on Thursday suggests a huge amount of investment and change that has happened, and the positive impact that we're having patients in keeping them out of hospital as much as possible.
Thanks, Neil.
Councillor Harpreet.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I also just wanted to flag staffing. I know it's kind of been raised by other colleagues, and particularly Alison. And I guess it's you've raised that you think actually some of these staffing issues will get better once you've reconfigured your services. But obviously there's a wider systems issue around social care and primary care as well. And I'm just wondering how you've assessed it overall in terms of the system, and how you might be registering it as risk at the moment, and how you might be registering it as risk as you go forward in your reconfiguration. And I also just wanted to ask about ambulance services as well. I know Colin raised this earlier, but didn't quite catch everything that Mark said. So you might have already answered this, but obviously given the issues around ambulance waiting times at the moment, I know from the report it says that you've done some work with the ambulance service to look at the timing of getting, the ambulance to the hospital under the reconfigured services. But I'm just wondering, with everything that's going on at the moment with waiting times, how are you sort of reassessing the issue with ambulance waiting times as well? Thank you.
So who wants to pick up on ambulances? Because the strategic outline case on page 36 states that reconfiguration of A&E in the way that we've described would lead to a requirement for 5,300 additional hours per annum of emergency ambulance usage, but that a further analysis of blue light ambulances will be undertaken during the development of the outline business case. So what does this analysis actually tell us, and can we see it?
Yeah, I can come in on that, Chair. So yeah, an analysis of ambulance transport has been undertaken by Yorkshire Ambulance Service themselves, following a number of reconfigurations of acute services across Yorkshire. Yorkshire Ambulance Service are probably one of the best in the country of reviewing the impact it has on their service, and they've reviewed our proposed changes based on their activity, and they have identified there's an increase in the need for additional ambulances to transfer patients mainly from the Huddersfield area to Calderdale. They have shared that data with our clinical commissioning groups who have deemed it to be affordable. It will involve an increase in the number of ambulances, about 2 staffed ambulances per day, and between 1 and 3 patients per day would be transferred to hospitals that are not currently within our footprint as a result of the changes. So that analysis has been done by Yorkshire Ambulance Service. I'm sure they'd be prepared to share the specific outcomes of that with you, but we can provide that at a later date. The other bit in terms of, for example, the delays to handover at hospitals, that links again in with the staffing and the workforce changes. Like I said before, by reconfiguration, figuring our services so that all of our acute services are on one site, it means that, for example, our medical STEC facility, which is currently having to be staffed on both sites and has limited times of opening because of the staffing requirements, by combining it onto one site, it means we can extend its opening hours. So it doesn't just work for 12 hours a day, it can work for 16, 18 hours a day. The same with our paediatric assessment capacity, the same with our frailty assessment capacity. Again, by putting them all on one site, you can increase the workforce that you've got on one site, so you're not doubling up. And by increasing that senior medical workforce, that means we can also utilise more people like advanced care practitioners, physicians associates, who are working under the supervision of those senior medical staff, so that we're not fully dependent on junior doctors and other trainees who we know are in short supply. So we're expanding the workforce opportunities that we have, which in itself would make it more sustainable and deliver the changes that are required so that we reduce the ambulance waiting times, which is why this sort of the changes that we're proposing work from both sides.
I think that's a very useful sort of snapshot of some of the opportunities that you've been exploring. I think that's the kind of detail that we would really like to be able to see at an early stage. We will be trying to schedule a session with the Yorkshire Ambulance Service at a later scrutiny meeting to look at. So thank you for that. Can I just ask, separation into a hot and cold site is going to produce an additional barrier to elective surgical beds being used for acute medical patients. It'll be a logistical barrier, but it reduces the flexibility with which the trust can use its available bed capacity. What modelling has been done to show the impact of a normal winter or even a severe winter, for example, with the way in which the distribution of beds that's now being proposed? And I presume that would be included within the outline business case. And have service continuity plans changed with the experience gained during the pandemic? I was wondering who might be willing to.
I'll start on that, and again, Mark might want to come in and add to it. I think in terms of the bed modelling work that we've done, we looked at across a year. The trust has so many physical spaces for beds, but it doesn't have all the beds open at all at the same time necessarily. We open and close beds as a key part of our operational management on both sides, dependent upon demand. And that's a key flexibility in the operational management process. So what we looked at is the trends, looking at both the peaks and troughs in the necessary beds that we needed to have open at key points. We've modelled at the peak number, because clearly a plan isn't valid if you model at the trough or at the average. It means you can't cope when demand goes up. So I think that, we've sought to make sure that we're future-proofing against when that demand is at its highest. Notwithstanding that, the experience during the pandemic has showed that there is particular crises responses that could occur again in the future, where we look at how we utilise our capacity in different ways. So part of the modelling plans for during the pandemic was around designating areas for different use, was around opening up additional capacity in areas that would not otherwise have been used for that purpose. And that would remain as part of a crisis management response in those unusual circumstances. So I think the short answer is we've sought to model our future capacity to have the ability to open up to the maximal peak that we've experienced, but not the peak that you might see in a pandemic scenario where you might need to, be looking at 20 additional ICU beds on a site. Then you need to take unusual actions, and there's been key learning operationally and clinically in the trust that will stand us in good stead going into the future. Again, Mark, don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, about the flexibility of response, really, in terms of the facilities.
And I think one of the key areas about flexibility is how we design the new wards and the new facilities that we build. So the new wards that we're going to be building at Calderdale are going to be sort of generic ward. They're not designed for one specialty or another, like we find a lot of the current wards we've got, so that it's possible to change a ward from being an orthopaedic ward to a medical ward, to a general surgery, to a gynecology, to a children's ward. So they're all multifunctional, and at the same time we'll be designing, as well as our emergency department will be designing dedicated same-day emergency care facilities, which again will have the flexibility built onto them. Again, going back to what we've learned from the pandemic is that while we can plan for normal, we can plan for busy, we can't necessarily plan for a pandemic, but we can be ready for another pandemic. And that's the whole thing. It's been future ready. And generally flexibility leads to sustainability. And that's what we'll be aiming to do with all of the new facilities that we're building over at Calderdale, so that we can swap and change purposes of wards as we need to. But at the same time, by having our elective surgery on a separate site, if we are coming to another pandemic, we don't have to stop, because we can still deliver that safe elective care on the other side, unless, of course, we become overwhelmed, which, again, we're in a different ballpark again.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smage.
I think we look forward to seeing that independent review for the ambulance service and that modelling that Anna's talked about. Can I just return back to community capacity, please? This was a key consideration of the IRP, and therefore I think it is essential that Scrutiny can see the capacity assumptions in the OBC, because where I am at the minute is that I cannot say that the capacity assumptions for community services have been addressed, that were raised by the IRP, and therefore I think it is essential that we not only have those discussions in place, but also we see those capacity assumptions in the OBC so that we can make that judgment. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm assuming that will be shared with us. Councillor Blackburrow.
Thank you, Chair. It's been extremely interesting, some really useful feedback. I have a question in relation to the actual planning and the item going to the planning department scheduled for January, because I'm very concerned that if this is delayed, what impact will that have? I currently have an application that I've been dealing with that should have gone to the council planning committee in August, and it's been delayed, and I'm just wondering what impact that will actually have on the plans moving forward.
Well, the determination around granting planning permission is a critical decision that we need to be able to progress further with the scheme. So we have had numerous and a very good and strong and positive dialogue with planning officers, and we are scheduled for January 4th. But yes, any delay in determination will have knock-on into the subsequent phases regarding delivery and construction.
Does that reassure you, Howard?
Yeah, I think it does. As it said, I'm just very much aware of the pressures on the planning department within Calderdale, and I'm glad you are having that dialogue. And I think it's just really useful to let members know that actually that is taking place, and that actually, fingers crossed, it will go to January. Because it is, as you say, it is an extremely crucial part of the whole process and involvement, of course. So thank you for that slight assurance, and fingers crossed.
Yeah. The previous full business cases contained quite detailed modelling of workforce, and obviously, as we've said earlier on in the meeting, workforce is the be-all, is one of the primary requirements of the service, and workforce costs form the greatest part of the trust's expenditure. So presumably detailed workforce modelling has been carried out as part of the outline business case. We do need to be able to see that modelling and what it tells us. Does it recognise the strong link between the numbers of fully trained nursing staff and the length of stay of patients and patient safety, which there's a very, very strong evidence base of that link? And And particularly if we're talking about a much greater number of single rooms within the new wards, monitoring of patients, observation of patients becomes much more tricky in single rooms than it does in a Nightingale ward. But this link between numbers of trained nurses, of fully qualified nurses, and patient outcomes is very clear. So has that been taken into account in workforce modelling?
If I could come in there, please, Chair. Yes, is the answer. So the nursing staffing levels on wards there's a standardised ratio of staff to patient depending on the acuity of the patients, which we work to already. And we're conscious, like you say, that the new wards will have an increased number of single side rooms from an infection control and dignity perspective. And those nursing models have been modified to reflect that and the requirement there. And that's part of the reason why we haven't gone for 100% single side rooms, in recognition that there is a potential increase in risk of things like falls in those rooms, and the additional revenue costs of staffing them to that higher number. So we believe we've taken a balanced view in terms of the number of side rooms and addressed the nursing requirements that are required for those. In addition, in places like the emergency department, we've looked at sort of the requirements for dedicated children's nurses in a dedicated children's emergency department, which addresses the mix of staffing required there. Other things in terms of workforces, again, the emergency department is just part of the urgent care offer. So there's workforce related to sort of urgent non-emergency care, as well as same-day emergency care. So there's staffing models for the medical and surgical and frailty same-day emergency care services that will reflect the estate that's developed for those services. And all those separate areas have been modelled separately.
Because the strategic outline case on page 70 mentions the development of both reduced and alternative workforce models. Doesn't go into any detail about that, but what's the current thinking on reduced and alternative workforce models, and where can we see a description of those models?
So those again will be related to things like I mentioned about the consolidation of the acute services onto one site. So the overall emergency medicine workforce will be reduced relative to what it is now. It'll change in that there won't be a need for as many registrars because of the use of associate care advanced care practitioners and physicians associates, so it's going to change in that respect. A critical care provision, there won't be a need for separate consultant on call for each site because there'll be one consultant for one critical care unit. We're not doubling up on all the numbers of staff that are required to manage these patients. Again, it's economies of scale because we're going to be on one site rather than two sites.
It would be good to see again, this all comes into the actual modelling of workforce that I think, given that we know the constraints that there are on both recruitment and retention, and that it's important that we know that this is going to produce something that's sustainable for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can provide a bit more of that detail in a written report following this.
Thank you. Again, the strategic outline case on page 37 states that reconfiguration will improve workforce productivity, including theatre utilisation. Now, I don't know if Mr. Chakrabarti has any thoughts on improving theatre utilisation and how the reconfiguration will improve theatre utilisation, or any other panel member.
Yeah, if I can come in again, sorry. We're doing some work at the moment, actually, with our surgical colleagues about modelling what surgery is going to be undertaken in which theatres, and there's a lot of work around what needs to be at which site, in particular around what is complex surgery. So we're working with colleagues to describe that, but we're also talking about things like, for example, rather than just a 4-hour list in the morning and a 4-hour list in the morning, if one specialty needs 6 hours to complete 2 operations, say, then they should use 6 hours, and then another specialty may be able to use it for the last 2 hours of the day. So it's trying to move away from the traditional, there's a 4-hour list in the morning and a 4-hour list in the afternoon. What do our patients need and what do our services need to deliver? So those kind of things from an efficiency perspective will be addressed, and we'll be working on those over the next 5 years of transformation. That's the bit about not doing what we do now, just in a different place. And we also know that by again separating out the elective from the non-elective means we don't have to cancel a big operation on the elective list because an emergency suddenly come in that's going to take up that theatre capacity. So by separating them out, we will have efficiencies automatically, but we want to work to maximise those by transforming the way we work as well. And I look forward to, in due course, coming back and describing those in a bit more detail to you.
That would be very, very helpful. Can I, while we're on the subject of theatres, am I correct that there are still 8 operating theatres at Calderdale Royal?
There are currently 9 theatres at Calderdale. There's 8 in the main theatre block and 1 maternity theatre.
Right.
We've got plans in place to increase that theatre capacity at Calderdale by 2, which will give us a 2nd maternity theatre and another general theatre. We haven't got into the detail as yet as to where exactly those are going to be located, but they will be linked with how we want to use them in the future.
Yeah, so because I was going to ask that, because the idea of having the block of 8 was always that it was safest that you had all your resources, your staffing, all in one place, and from a plant point of view, that it was also helpful, that it was also very helpful that you could use your staff flexibly. So whether these 2 additional theatres that are going to be built will be standalone theatres, or are they going to be directly linked with the main theatre block for those same safety and efficiency reasons that it was built that way in the first place?
And again, I guess that comes back to the transformation work that we're planning. There were very good reasons for designing them as they are back then, and we need to make note of those reasons, but we also need to look at how are we going to work now and over the next 10 to 15 years. And those designs that were great 10, 15 years ago may not be the best idea now. So it may be that we want to build one of the new theatres right next door to the surgical S-deck so that we can have people in and out for their appendicectomy and go straight home without needing to bother the main theatre block. And those are the things that we still need to work through with our surgical and anaesthetic colleagues.
So in terms of the actual internal layout of the buildings, the new builds, that's not been determined yet?
It's not, we've not got to that level of detail of design yet, no.
Right.
And a lot of that is dependent on the outline planning application that we're waiting for a decision on in January.
Referring to the case for change, slide 4, I was involved in the design process of Calderdale Royal Hospital, and I've got the scars, mental scars to show from that. There was a lot of clinical input into the design initially, but as the design process continued, that clinical input was set to one side, and demands to reduce the cost of the build led to most rooms becoming smaller, the loss of soft space such as storage rooms, rooms for Breaking Bad, where you could have confidential discussions with patients or relatives, Breaking Bad news, things like that. Office space on the wards, we know sort of the move to much more electronic stuff hasn't got rid of the need for somewhere to actually input that data and look at it, and the space around beds. Many of the issues that are described on slide 4 on the case for change slide 4, which the intention is to address those in the new build. How can we be ensure can we ensure that we're not going to find ourselves in the same position where this is squeezed down and down so it no longer actually functions efficiently, and that clinical input to the design is maintained throughout the design process?
I think that's probably down to myself, Mr. Chakrabarti, Dr. Moisey, and Matron Cockcroft, who we are the clinical leads for this project. And while part of our role is to design or support the design and make sure colleagues are involved in the design, it's also to ensure that those design features that we put in aren't taken out at a later date. We're effectively clinically accountable for ensuring the facility that we build is fit for purpose and does what our colleagues need it to do to deliver the care to our patients. And I'm sure I speak for all of us that we're very passionate about making sure that this works for patients. I'm sure I've mentioned here that I've been working on reconfiguration in one way or another for about the last 10 years. I don't certainly intend to throw it away over the next 5.
I wish you all the very best in that process, Mark, and stick with it. Councillor Smage.
Yeah, I just had a very quick question, just conscious of time. Your slide mentions about 18 ICU beds with the ability to go to 22 in future. Do we have a timeline for that in future? Or is that just a hope in case the extra capacity is needed? And what is the difference between ICU and high dependency? Because in my head, I've got them as two, they're connected but slightly separate. So is the capacity in the high dependency unit ability to increase as well as the ICU? Thank you.
Yeah, so there's 2 things there. The intensive care, the current basic intensive care capacity across our organisation is 13. That's 8 at Huddersfield and 5 at Calderdale. So by going to 18, we're increasing that capacity by 5, and there'll be dedicated space available that if we need to extend that further, there'll be room for another 4. So that gives us our sustainability into the future, probably beyond 10 years from now. It doesn't necessarily, again, make capacity for a future pandemic where we may need to double. But again, like I mentioned about the flexibility of the new building will allow possibility for that to occur if needs be. In terms of the difference between intensive care and high dependency, it's really about the nursing capacity and the support that's required there. And we fully recognise as well that at the moment, as a general rule, anybody in our organisation who needs that higher dependency care, what we'd call level 2 care, that's generally delivered on the intensive care unit. But increasingly, we're seeing colleagues wanting to develop their own high dependency services for single illnesses outside of intensive care. So, for example, our respiratory team are now delivering high dependency respiratory care, particularly to COVID patients, on their respiratory ward with an enhanced nurse model. So that means that what we use for intensive care will actually be able to do outside of the intensive care unit, which makes our intensive care, in inverted commas, capacity even greater. And again, that's about changing the way we do things. And again, that's only possible by consolidating rotas onto one site so that we can provide the medical support to those units on one site rather than splitting it over 2.
Thank you. Councillor Harpreet.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to staffing again. So it's probably you, Mark. Obviously, you outlined the case of, why it's a good thing to go on to one site in terms of staffing in the future. But right now, if I could just ask you outlined some quite very serious workforce challenges. in this presentation. And I think in one of the slides, it says, in terms of the case for change number 3 workforce, it says the Trust faces considerable workforce challenges, which undermines the resilience of clinical services, staff satisfaction and well-being. I just wanted to ask, I mean, obviously that sounds quite concerning and quite serious at the moment. I'm just wanting to ask what concerns you might have around quality of care that's being provided currently, given those staff force, so those workforce challenges. And also, how are you sort of monitoring that risk at the moment? So is it flagged as quite a high issue in your risk register, for example, as a trust?
Yes, I think workforce is a challenge, and it's particularly a challenge. Workforce is a challenge particularly across our acute services, so emergency medicine. So for example, just at the weekend, I was a consultant on call and I worked a night shift on Saturday and Sunday because we didn't have a senior doctor to staff the emergency department of Huddersfield safely. As it happened, we had a senior doctor to staff the emergency department of Calderdale. If that doctor had phoned in sick, had to isolate or anything like that, then we'd have a serious risk. We could not deliver to emergency departments safely. So those are significant risks, and it's currently flagged as a significant risk on the Trust risk register. So there's a constant battle of moving people around on rotas, moving people from a day shift to a night shift, from a late shift to an early shift to accommodate that. We use locums when we can do, but we're conscious of making sure that the quality of those locums are adequate. It's not just a name on a piece of paper. It has to be somebody who can do the job and do the job safely and well. But yeah, we recognise that these challenges, particularly when they're bad as they are at the moment, does cause a risk, and it's important that we recognise that.
Okay. And are you concerned about the quality of services that you're providing at the moment because of the issues around workforce?
Yeah, I think absolutely. The way that we're having to deliver services at the moment is affecting quality. And it is affecting safety, and that's the exact case for change, for why we need to change. A lot of our services have already reconfigured, acute surgery, acute orthopedics, reconfigured for exactly these reasons a number of years ago, and have seen some of those benefits. We're now left with acute medicine, emergency medicine, and critical care, as well as paediatrics are probably the 4 that are left that are still split across the sites, but they're big numbers of patients, which is why we have to make such wholesale changes to our estate in order to mitigate those risks, because we've pretty much done everything that we can other than this.
I mean, certainly in the previous full business cases that were done back, 7 or 8 years ago, the problem of inadequate levels of workforce being available to recruit were flagged up then. I know Jeremy Hunt is on record as saying that one of his biggest regrets as Health Secretary for many years was that he didn't address the workforce issues with sufficient alacrity, and we still lack a funded people plan for workforce within the health service, and even more so for social care. So, one can't see that these warnings, these concerns have been addressed with given the importance that they should have done, and actually got on and dealt with it, whether at regional level or at national level. Just a specific question. West Yorkshire and Harrogate Joint Health Scrutiny Committee was looking at the Nightingale Hospital that was set up in Harrogate, and we were told that the main reason for wanting to use it for higher dependency patients was because that the oxygen supply infrastructure within our hospitals across Yorkshire was not sufficient to deliver the flow of oxygen required when so many people were in continuous positive airways pressure and that was the principal thing that drove the need for the Nightingale Hospital. Is the oxygen supply system within the new build and within the refurbishments on the Huddersfield side of things going to be capable of delivering a much higher delivery of oxygen than it currently does, so that we won't find ourselves in a similar position again?
So again, we haven't got into that level of detail of design, but we are conscious that at Calderdale, particularly during the peak of the pandemic, we were monitoring oxygen demand and supply, and we're sort of conscious that we needed to keep an eye on it, and we're conscious that whatever facilities that we build at Calderdale, we will need to increase the oxygen supply capability to meet that need, and be prepared for any future pandemic, because again, Calderdale would be the site that would take the majority of any future pandemics, particularly respiratory, need an extra oxygen. So those again would go into the design features. But I've no doubt there will be an increase in the oxygen delivery facilities over at Calderdale.
Good.
But we haven't got to the detail of that yet.
Okay, that's understandable. I just have one other question. This reconfiguration doesn't appear on the list of schemes in the National Hospital Programme, the 40 or 48 new hospitals that are going to be built around the country. Why not? So, my question is, what is the scheme's status regarding funding commitments?
So I can answer that one, Councillor Hutchinson. The reason we're not included in the hospitals listed under the new hospitals programme, the 40 new hospitals, is because our scheme predates that initiative and the launch of the new hospitals programme. So our funding was announced in 2018 under what was called the Sustainability and Transformation Planning Funding, so-called STP Wave 4. So there is firm commitment on that planning application of public capital, but it predates the new hospitals programme, which was a further tranche of funding and commitments announced at a later stage.
Okay. Well, I won't be too worried then, seeing where it ranks in the hierarchy on that programme then. Right. It looks as if we've. Thank you very much for addressing the questions as far as you've been able to, and we have already submitted a list of areas that we would like to see more detail of, particularly around the modelling side of things and the financial, the financial aspects of this program. But I think, Anna, we've lodged those with you, and happy to work with you in terms of trying to flesh out the information that we have as much as possible. So looking forward as to what elements need to be considered in future sessions. If Mike Lodge or Richard would like to say something about the future work plan.
If I may, Chair, and my apologies, I do need to leave for another meeting at 12 o'clock. But you have talked about having a meeting in the new year where we would invite the ambulance service. We would revisit the travel plan, and we would revisit some of the issues that have been raised at a previous meeting about the sustainability of the building in terms of in the context of climate and sustainability.
The carbon budget for the
carbon budget. I would suggest that we should wait until the planning discussions at Calderdale Council about the Calderdale Royal Hospital site, and perhaps the co-chairs could meet with myself and Richard and colleagues to work out a suitable date and agenda.
we've outlined the timeline for the full business case for the Huddersfield A&E and the outline business case for Calderdale Royal, and the time between those us being able to see that and moving on to the next stage, whether it's construction or of the A&E or progression to influence the full business case for the main reconfiguration, is going to be fairly tight. So we're going to have to be fairly nimble in terms of scheduling meetings when those documents become available to us. So I would ask members to be flexible, and I would hope that there's flexibility from the Trust and NHS England and the CCGs in allowing us to actually discharge our duties as a scrutiny panel. Are there any comments on the, Anna?
Mine was just a point of clarification. I just, in your providing a summary there, Councillor Hutchinson, when we spoke earlier in the meeting today, I indicated that subsequent to approval of the full business case at national level, we would be able to publish the document. I'm not in a position to be able to confirm that we would be able to publish the outline business case. And as you know, that goes back to the ongoing dialogue that we're having with NHS England and through the national process. I didn't want there to be any mixed expectation or confusion in what I'd said earlier.
But in due course, I believe we've been told that it's not until it's received Treasury approval that we'd be able to actually see the document. But following that, we would be able to, I presume.
Are you referring to the outline business case, yes, Councillor Hutchinson? Yes. I think the entirety of the document will not be suitable for publication at any point because of it will have high commercial and legal sensitivity ahead of a major procurement exercise. And I'll refer back to, we are in those conversations around ability to share and publish documents directly with NHS England and at national level. No, we're very clear locally. We will seek to share with you, as we have today, as fully as we can, whilst not able to publish the documents, to share as much information as we can.
Yes, I think this was something that there will be further discussions over regarding the regulations that govern scrutiny of these projects, as Councillor Snage mentioned earlier on. Any other comments from members about the work plan? Okay. Well, in which case, thank you very much for your input into this meeting, and we will schedule another meeting in the new year following the planning, hopefully the discussion of the project at planning committee.